All right, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining me for this explainer. Let's just jump right in, because today we are exploring a place that is widely considered the cradle of one of the world's oldest and most magnificent civilizations. We are unpacking the absolutely epic 5,000-year legacy of ancient Egypt. I mean, this is a land where the world's longest river flows, right? Where the Great Sphinx has been guarding desert secrets for literally thousands of years. It's a history completely wrapped up in mummies, monumental architecture, and golden treasures, and it's a history that is still very much alive today.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the geographical lifeline of the region, the gift of the Nile. Second, the rise of the pharaohs. Third, we'll marvel at the monuments of eternity. Fourth, we'll dive into their quest for immortality. And finally, we'll wrap up with their enduring legacy.
Okay, before we get into the massive structures and the famous kings, let's start with the name itself. You see, before the Greeks arrived and called this land Aegyptos, which, you guessed it, eventually became Egypt, the ancient locals actually had a very different name for their home. They called it Kemet, which translates to Black Earth. And this wasn't just a catchy name, it was a really profound testament to the life-giving power of the Nile River. Every single year, the river would flood, and it would leave behind this thick layer of dark, incredibly fertile soil right in the middle of a hyper-arid desert. This black earth was the absolute foundation of their survival. It's literally what allowed human civilization to flourish there for millennia.
And that brings us perfectly to our first chapter, the gift of the Nile and the geographical roots of this golden empire.
So, to truly understand ancient Egypt, you absolutely have to understand its geography. The Nile River is incredibly unique because it flows from south to north, eventually emptying out into the Mediterranean Sea. And this created two very distinct regions. Down in the south, you have Upper Egypt, which is this mountainous, rocky, rugged landscape. But up in the north, where the river meets the sea and fans out into a massive, lush, green delta, you have Lower Egypt. For a really long time, these were entirely separate realms, which perfectly set the stage for one of the most historic unifications in all of human history.
Let's move right into our second section and see how all of this builds into the rise of the pharaohs, unifying a golden empire. This sweeping history really kicks off roughly 5,000 years ago. A legendary figure named King Narmer achieved the monumental feat of unifying that mountainous Upper Egypt with the fertile Lower Egypt. And joining those two lands, it kick-started an era of just unprecedented power. By 2600 BC, we enter the Old Kingdom. This is a time when rulers like Pharaoh Khufu started erecting those colossal pyramids to showcase their immense strength. Fast forward a bit to the New Kingdom, and we hit the absolute golden age of ancient Egypt. We're talking iconic names here: the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, the great Ramses II, leaders who elevated the empire's glory to its absolute peak. But the wheel of time turns for every empire. By 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquers Egypt. After his death, his general Ptolemy started a brand new dynasty, which eventually led to the legendary Queen Cleopatra VII. She was famous for her astonishing intelligence and political skill, and she actually became the very last of the active pharaohs. Now, the pharaohs themselves may have faded away, but what they built certainly didn't. This brings us to Section 3, Monuments of Eternity, architecture that literally defied time. Now, when you look at the Great Pyramids or those towering temples, I want you to ask yourself a question. Why were these massive, thousands of years old structures actually built? I mean, what would possess a society to move millions of incredibly heavy stones without any modern machinery?
Well, the answer lies in their worldview. You see, the ancient Egyptians didn't view these simply as tombs, not at all. They viewed them as houses of eternity. They truly, deeply believed that life continued after death, and so they needed a permanent home for the afterlife. And because it was meant to last literally forever, they couldn't just use mud bricks. They used incredibly durable materials: limestone, sandstone, and heavy granite. Plus, these ancient engineers built these structures with just astonishing precision. We're talking perfectly aligned with the sun and the stars, and those incredibly thick stone walls, they were specifically designed to keep the interiors cool under the scorching heat of the desert sun.
But this incredible architectural skill didn't just happen overnight. It evolved over time. It started around 2670 BC at Saqqara, where the very first step pyramid was built for Pharaoh Djoser. This was an absolute revolution in design, and that breakthrough directly inspired the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza for Pharaoh Khufu a few decades later. A structure so massive, it is still the only intact wonder of the ancient world. But here is perhaps the most important detail: who actually built them? You've probably heard the myth that slaves built the pyramids, while modern archaeological research tells us that is completely false. These structures were actually built by thousands of highly skilled artisans. In fact, entire specialized settlements were built right next to the pyramids just to house, feed, and care for these highly respected workers.
And the global importance of these monuments is so massive that humanity is still fighting to protect them today. Just think about this incredible fact. In the 1960s, the entire Abu Simbel temple was cut block by block and moved higher to save it from the rising Nile waters. If you don't know Abu Simbel, it's this massive temple carved directly into the side of a mountain by Ramses II. So when modern dam construction threatened to flood it entirely, international teams worked together to literally cut the stone mountain into movable blocks and reassemble the whole shebang on higher ground. It stands today as a modern miracle of preservation, honoring an ancient miracle of construction.
Of course, all this massive effort in construction was driven by a really deep spiritual conviction, which we're going to explore right now in Section 4, the quest for immortality.
The ancient Egyptians had this incredibly deep faith in the afterlife. They believed that preserving the physical body was absolutely essential so the soul could eventually return to it. So they perfected the art of mummification, using special herbs and chemical treatments. But here is the wild part. They didn't just mummify humans. They carefully and respectfully mummified cats, birds, and even crocodiles. So the crucial takeaway here is that they didn't just view these animals as household pets, they viewed them as spiritual protectors. They were direct representatives of their gods on earth, and therefore deserving of the exact same eternal honors as human beings.
And what did they use to adorn these eternal bodies? Gold. But wait, it wasn't just because it looked pretty or because they wanted to show off their wealth. To the ancient Egyptians, gold was literally considered the flesh of the gods. Think about it. They were master observers of nature, right? They noticed that over time, iron would rust away and completely decay. They saw that copper would oxidize and turn green. But gold? Gold never tarnishes and never rusts. Even after thousands of years in a tomb, it maintains its brilliant warm shine. And because of this imperishable quality, it became the ultimate symbol of immortality. It represented the indestructible and eternal nature of the divine itself.
Which brings us to one of the most famous archaeological discoveries in all of human history. King Tutankhamun's death mask contains a staggering 11 kilograms of pure solid gold. That is incredibly heavy. By covering the young pharaoh's face in the flesh of the gods, they weren't just flexing his immense wealth. They were actively trying to ensure his face remained pristine and indestructible, allowing his soul to easily recognize him in the afterlife, ultimately securing his place among the eternal gods.
But their quest for eternity went far, far beyond tombs and treasure, as we're going to see in our final section, An Enduring Legacy.
You know what's really fascinating here? It's how their everyday ancient inventions instantly bridge a 5,000-year gap between their world and our modern daily lives. The ancient Egyptians didn't just build pyramids. They laid the foundations of modern society. In order to accurately predict those life-saving floods of the Nile River, they invented the 365-day calendar. The world's oldest surviving piece of woven clothing, the beautiful Tarkan dress, was found in Egypt and is over 5,000 years old. And just think about the items you probably use every single week. Early iterations of locks and keys to secure doors, scissors for cutting, and even the very earliest concepts of high-heeled shoes, they all have roots in ancient Egypt. Their incredible capacity for innovation literally touched everything, from monumental engineering right down to everyday domestic life.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Did the pharaohs truly achieve the immortality they so desperately sought? I mean, sure, their physical bodies might reside in glass cases in museums rather than the majestic afterlife they imagined, but look around us. We still track our years using their 365-day math. We still travel across the globe to stand in absolute awe of their houses of eternity. We still marvel at their art, their golden treasures, and the brilliant minds that built an entire civilization out of the black earth. So through their architectural wonders and their enduring inventions, I think it's pretty clear their legacy lives on forever. In a very real way, they actually did achieve immortality. Thank you so much for exploring the phenomenal land of the pharaohs with me in this explainer. Until next time, keep learning and keep wondering.